helping you crack the code to productivity. Every Wednesday's our community.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third clinic, which is going to be focusing on customers. So, in this particular session, we're going to be talking about how to build great relationships with customers and how do you use that to retain your customers. The agenda is something similar. I won't actually go through the basic framework for people who have attended my previous clinics. Apologies. You might have to listen through this. It's for the benefit of people who have joined recently. And moving beyond that, how do companies use this and what can you do to take something from a practical perspective and implement it in your businesses? So the agenda is very simple: setting the scene, what we did with a particular client, what we learned, and what can you take away from this. I know there is a lot of information that is available. ChatGPT is adding more complexities as well as simplifying things. So what I want to do is keep it simple, and that's why it's a 30-minute session. I'll be speaking for 20 minutes, and then let's have the floor open for questions. Now, what we do is basically we have a fundamental framework, and this is I have worked with a lot of organizations. I have run consultancy for from an employee perspective, customer perspective, and a strategy perspective, and have helped companies go through cultural change, bring the best out of employees, make customers become fans. So those are the things that I've done in my previous life. So I'm actually bringing all that and summarizing it and offering it as knowledge sessions. So what we do is basically we talk about three things. For a business to survive, you need to have some kind of an idea or a strategy. And strategy is no good if it just stays in your head. You need to execute it. So if you're a solopreneur or if you've got a team, you need employees who will take the strategy and execute it. But a business that has got a great strategy and great employees is not going to survive if you're not going to have customers. So we focus on these three things, and those are the core pillars. And people who know me know that I am a fan of acronyms. So the deal is an acronym that I've created. What do I mean by deal? Now, we look at the areas where things are happening between these three areas, like where customers and employees intersect. That's area one. Where employees and strategy intersect, that is area two. Where strategy and customers intersect, that's area three. And where customers, employees, and strategy intersect, the core, which we is called the area four. So area one, this one is about delivery. This is where employees start delivering a service or sell the product, get the support, provide the support for customers to use the products. That is the D. E is the engagement, where employees need to be engaged with what the organization wants. And anything that you do with, to enhance engagement, to enhance employee experience, falls in this. A is the alignment. You can't build a product and expect the market will come and buy. So you need to be aligned with what the market wants. So what we try to do is basically look at how you can align the strategy of your business with what market wants to meet their spelt and unspelt needs. And the dynamic core is where all of this is driven. If you look at it, it's like a propeller. And area four is L, which is leadership. Without great quality leadership, none of this works. So that's why the acronym DEAL comes into play. Now, how they lead is what we're going to talk about. It's a play on words, deal, lead, but I'm talking about leaders. When I talk about leaders, every leader that has been successful, who I have worked with, who actually got the best out of people, have a very clear purpose. They know why they're doing it. They know why they want their employees and the teams to do it. But that alone is not enough. They're very, very, very focused on growth. And when they do that, they want to do that by focusing on customers. They are absolutely paranoid about the service that they offer to their customers and are passionate about the levels of quality of service that is being provided. And they know that they can do that only with great talent. So they are focused on nurturing talent, training talent. These are not the leaders who say employees are our asset and then depreciate them. These are the leaders who actually invest in their employees and try to get the best out of them. But that alone is not enough because you might have a great employee network or a team. But if your processes are not efficient, that actually has an impact. So they are also passionate about operational excellence. And last but not least, they are bold. They take decisions. They take calculated risks. They start looking at things which are beyond what the common, business looks at. And that's what they actually do to get, in front of all their competitors. Now we're going to be talking about an area today, which is around customers. And what I wanted to do was basically we talk about customer experience, and I wanted to actually give you an overview of how we have helped companies decode experience. This applies both to employees as well as customers because we are all people. So when we talk about productivity or performance, that basically requires us to look at the behaviors that employees demonstrate towards the customers or the customers demonstrate towards the product and service. It works both ways because this is an equation and this is what you call the approach that we have seen that works. And behavior happens only when you think you should be part of that. Only when a customer decides that they want to actually engage with the organization, they tend to become more, positive. They're more welcoming. The body language changes, which then results in them buying the product or service or becoming a fan of the organization. And this used to be the case, and people used to be focusing on various things that you could do to enhance customer experience or employee experience and engagement. And I use this term loosely, experience and engagement, because at one point in time, there was customer experience, but there was only employee engagement. And there was always a confusion between these two. But there is a very clear demarcation between what engagement is and what experience is. Experience is one level below engagement. This is how you make them feel. And this is basically what I call as the energy in motion. Now, when we look at this, how a customer feels makes them think that they are getting the right kind of service, which then impacts their behavior, which then impacts how they actually go ahead and buy a product or service. So we use the same framework. If you remember last week, I'm just keeping this just to explain how things are similar. Last week, when we spoke about employees, I did walk you through the same approach, but where I said it is the values and your work and life balance of an employee impacts this. Now, in the case of the customer, what the organization does, it starts from the experience, shaping the experience. And if you look at, if you've read the book, Think Slow, Act Fast, he talks about system one and system two thinking, which is your engagement, level one and level two. But one is basically your autopilot. And feeling always trumps thought. And experience is energy in motion, right? It is when you're feeling something, there is a lot of changes that happen in your system. There is neurological changes, there is physical changes, your heart rate increases, your blood flow as a result increases. Your brain actually starts buzzing. There's a lot of hormones released, and that can be. I mean, we are employees and customers at the same time, so you can see how by using a unified way of measuring, you can start bringing what an employer company does with the employee experience and correlate it with what customer experience means. So it becomes easy to track one on one. Now, what we are going to talk about today is basically the 5 levers of experience and how a client of mine used it. Now, when I did my PhD, I was actually trying to understand why people buy from people. How do we value people? When you look at someone, you like them or you don't like them. So what is happening inside our heads? So I collected data and I distilled it. And when I distilled it, ultimately it came down to our values. When I distilled it further, it went down to one core thing, which is fear. Fear is one core, whether you call it value or a feeling that actually makes you to act or not act. Now, to overcome fear, you need to actually have trust in that particular thing. So if you look at a linear line, fear is at one end, trust is at the other end. So the more you're fearful, the more you stay in the fearful end. But the more you win trust, you move away from fear, move closer towards trust. How many of us are actually, comfortable speaking in a crowd? Remember the first time that you actually started speaking, your heart rate was like this. Then probably the second time your heart rate was. the third time, fourth time probably. So you started trusting in your own ability to deliver a good content, good speech, and so on and so forth. So this is one thing. And from an experience point of view, for an organization, if you're selling a product or a service, just having trust is fine. But if it involves people interaction, then you need to have empathy. So that is one of the reasons why in NHS, when we talk about bedside manners, if the doctors don't demonstrate the right kind of empathy, patients can still trust the doctor but walk away from that. So these three things actually work in unison, and that shapes our or triggers our feelings, which then results in loyalty, commitment, and satisfaction. Now I'll go a bit into this, but what I'll do is basically I want to park these things and then say this is where we started with a client. I'll tell you what we did with the client. This client basically wanted to understand their customer base and then use that insight to offer customized solutions or products or services or whatever. And this time I'm not talking about a hospitality company. I'm talking about a telecom company. So we started looking at the three things that are the core: your fear, your empathy, and your trust. We try to understand what is actually the relationship between these three things. And as I told earlier, we realized that that's by asking a simple question on how much do you trust an organization to deliver whatever. We use very standard questions. Do you think the organization is empathetic? So by asking questions that were already vetted, validated, we could get an idea of how much an organization is trusted by the customers, and we could also flip it and ask the same question to employees also. Now when you did that, it then manifests as these three things. Now satisfaction, commitment, and loyalty are people actually interchange this. And everyone, when you talk about customer experience, they always talk about loyalty. But loyalty does not actually give you great experience and does not help you to retain customers. Let me explain the difference between satisfaction, loyalty, and commitment. In this example, let's say you're interested in an iPhone. This particular company basically was selling iPhones, so they were satisfied with whatever service was provided by the company when it came to the service domain. So satisfaction was there, but then their loyalty was towards iPhone. So when the company decided to actually, they had exclusivity for iPhones for a period of time, and then iPhone was made available to all the other companies in the UK. So loyalty means that they are, as a client, I am interested in the iPhone. But commitment is me going and buying it from that particular company only and not going to another provider. Another example, you like coffee. So more coffee you have, you're satisfied. Let's say you are loyal to Starbucks, then you go and buy coffee only from Starbucks, even if you have a Costa next to you or Nero next to you. But then commitment is going and buying from the same shop because you appreciate the value, the service that you get from that particular shop. So that is the difference. So what happens is when your trust levels are high, when your empathy, when you feel that you're treated with empathy, it impacts your satisfaction, your loyalty, and commitment. So what we did was we actually did a modeling there. So we looked at very simple way of, we asked again three questions, like your NPS question for loyalty, we asked a question for commitment, and we asked a question for satisfaction. Of course, we did a, a lot deeper dive into other things, which I'm not going to go in, but it gives you a flavor of what we did. So we looked at, a client basically who had low satisfaction, low loyalty, and low commitment. They were called as the eroders. And then you had high satisfaction, but low commitment and low loyalty. They were drainers. And these were guys who were always after deals and deals and deals and deals. And then we looked at customers who had high loyalty, but low satisfaction and low commitment. That was a difficult customer. And we you look at it, we classified them. I'm not going to go through everything. We classified them as indifferent. Then customers who were high on commitment, but were not high on loyalty, were habitual. uh, Someone who was high on commitment but high on satisfaction but low on loyalty, we call them the chancers. Now, these labels were created by the organization based on the customer profiles they looked at. Now, I'll get into that. So, again, when you have high commitment and high loyalty, low satisfaction, they are stars. And then all three high, they call them as superstars. Now, with this, what they did was they went back and started looking at their customer base. Because if you remember, when we had multiple players who were operating in telco, there was high levels of attrition and same levels of people were also coming into your brand. So companies were not really focused on retaining the customers because they know that 20% go, the churn is 20%, you get another 20% coming in or 18% coming in or whatever. So that was all the game that was going on. But this company decided to take and play things differently. So they did this analysis and then they clustered their customers based on this into those 8 categories. And they decided to actually not focus on the first two ones, which we talked about, Brainer and I can't remember the other one, sorry, uh, Eroda. These two categories, they said, okay, they're going, good riddance. So they were not focused on that. Then what they then did was they started looking at each of these categories and then started looking at what can we do to ensure that people who are loyal are moving here and people who are committed are also moving to the star superstar category. So then they went back and started looking at what can we do from a process perspective to change how these people felt and from a people perspective to change how these people felt. They did the same thing with this. And what they did was they also started looking at what can we do to understand and learn from here and see how it can be replicated across various stores and all that. So for a telco company that is selling a product which is not theirs, so you have to ensure that they are loyal to. It doesn't matter whether they are loyal to a brand of a phone. It could be Samsung or it could be iPhone, but they have to be loyal to your brand or at least committed to buying only from O2. So but if you're a business that does not have that problem, where you actually sell, you don't sell, represent someone else, what you sell is what you make, then you need to focus both on loyalty and commitment. So the decision to focus on commitment then on loyalty was taken. But having said that, they also started looking at what can we do to enhance the perceptions of these people so that they start moving in this direction. So what happened was we went and collected data and this is all very grand, it looks brilliant as a framework and all this stuff, but what we wanted to do was make it practical. So we went to various cities. We looked at 3 cities where different demographic of people were there, and we started looking at what can we do to understand why customers don't buy from us. So the problem was people who come into a store are not buying. What are the things that are there from a process perspective and a people perspective that we can change? And they then took that insight, went back to the type of customer, and then started bringing in the change. Like, for example, I'm just going to walk through a few things. There are lots of things that we did, but I'm just going to give you 5 things that we focused on. Retention strategies. People in London had a different way of looking at things compared to people in Windsor and in Manchester. We also did Birmingham and one thing in Wales. I can't remember where it was, but I think it was Cardiff. I'm not sure. But so what we did was we started looking at what can you do differently as a result of our understanding of what the customer base is and where it actually has an impact. So if you look at this, the high levels of employee interaction drives commitment. That was a common thing which we have seen. So what can you do differently? If you look at Manchester, it was solution oriented problem solving, which impacted how people felt about the brand, and that really enhanced commitment, and they were happy to. They built relationships that way. For London, it was more from an empathy and relationship point of view, like knowing them and that kind of a thing. Windsor was about this Windsor. People who know Windsor basically is not, where a buzzing youngling population is touristy, and you got a lot of senior citizens there. So they were more worried about value and process excellence and all that stuff. We looked at loyalty, and we realized that when that's what I talked about earlier, iPhone and that particular company. How do you then bring them, move the loyalty away from iPhone to this particular company? get them to become loyal to the company rather than the phone brand. So then they took a decision. I can't go into the details of it, but what they did was they launched exclusive phone launches and all that stuff. They have started offering city-specific incentives to bring people in. Now, I'm not going to go through the other things, but we saw wait times, how to reduce wait times. They saw, okay, people who came into the store started looking at, they saw the crowd and then they just went. People who were coming to buy accessories, they said, okay, from a mechanical point of view, let's put some vending machines with accessories. So they did that. So what I'm trying to say is we can actually use that particular framework that I shared earlier, and they actually created something which was immensely valuable. And they were also the first ones to recognize that by retaining customers other than the eroders and drainers, they can actually start. Anyways, new customers are coming in, so the customer base grows. So they started seeing an increase in that. And what we also did was basically then start reaching out to the customers and asking for specific feedback based on what category they fit into, and then using that. And they were the guys who recognized that, you know, phone lines, it was basically when a lot of things were going online, Skype was becoming a big thing and all that stuff. No, not Skype, sorry, WhatsApp. What am I talking? So they realized that, moving away from a traditional line contract to a broadband contract is the way to go, because they saw that the death of texting, the death of phone calls, because voice over internet protocol was taking over. So they were more focused on that, and they started building packages and testing it out then. So that basically gave them a lot of insight as to what and how you could do differently. Now, I'm happy to share the framework, but the question is, what have we learned from this? It's built, we realize that you have to customize the experience. And there are people you should actually let go because they are eroding your profits, but build the relationship with the existing customers by focusing on trust and, bringing them as part of the family. And by doing that, you create them as fans for your brand. And what we also did was we built a customer signal dashboard where we started tracking what was the quality of relationships for each of these customers. We used a very, very simple set. When I talk about practical application, I can share that with you. And then we use this to start seeing where things are going right and wrong. And then people used to call up and then say, hey, you took this contract with us, are you happy? And then 6 months later, they would call up to ensure that everything happens. And before your contract is up for renewal, again, they would do all this. So all this makes your customer relationship quality grow stronger. And then they started bringing a lot of stories where they've helped clients and started publishing, internalizing it. So it was not about just conversations. They would tell stories as to how other customers benefited as a result, which made people feel more welcome, because we love to listen to stories and we can actually relate to them. So that is what happened. Now, if this is all fine and good, and what I said earlier was, how can you actually internalize this? What makes it much more interesting? So let us take your business. Let us say it can be a hospitality business, it can be any business that you run. You could actually start taking a key customer segment you want to assess, or you can assess your entire customer portfolio. Start by asking those questions, which I told you. You can find the most, if you Google and look at the top, or ask ChatGPT, because now that's becoming more popular, questions that you ask about trust and empathy and fear, try and understand and build a relationship. What we did was we actually created a question set of only 6 questions, with the sixth one being open-ended, where we asked questions about trust, empathy, satisfaction, loyalty, and commitment, and created a score. Now, it's easy to put these things together and create something. And I used to say, any monkey can use SurveyMonkey to create a question set, but creating the number that is relevant to the business is the challenge. So if you're going to be putting together the question set, use the commonly used questions, which means people relate to it, but then you need to tweak it to ensure that it actually reflects reality. So you might have to do a little bit of uh, plug and play and testing and all that stuff. But once you do that, you can then start understanding What is the quality of the relationships that you have with these people? Then you can then start seeing why they are buying, why are they not buying? How can I influence it from a process perspective? How can I influence it from a people perspective? Because when someone is thinking about buying, where should they start? Where should your journey start? That's another conversation. But I can tell you, you have to think 3 or 4 steps before that. So if someone is thinking of buying your product or service, you need to be in front of their eyes or in front of their world. So, how do you build a brand? How do you make the halo effect of your brand impact that? So, I'm not talking about that, but you can start looking at what you can start doing differently as a result of it. You can look at your customers. You can then say, okay, that's basically kind of the experience or the quality of relationships that I have with them. And this is, I know these are some of the reasons why they buy, I don't buy. And the funny thing is, when customers buy from us, we don't go and ask them why they buy from us, because that's another thing that you can do to start building relationships. And when people don't buy from you, we very rarely go and ask them, I did everything. Where did I falter for my own benefit, my own improvement? Can you suggest? If you start asking those questions, suddenly you start getting loads of data about what your talent is, where your skill can be improved, and suddenly you become the best version of yourself. And then you can see, okay, how is that impacting commitment, and how is it impacting loyalty? Ask them to run an independent NPS, compare it against what you're seeing. So suddenly you can then start seeing a much more positive impact on what you need to be doing. So when you have a big picture, when you know what your customers want, when you know what the challenges they are facing, and you know how you can change it from a process perspective and a people perspective, start creating specific initiatives to address that. And my advice is, please don't go and do a massive thing. So that's why I said, choose one segment. Maybe it might be that you might have to let that segment go, which is brilliant because they are actually eroding value. Fantastic. Then start looking at another segment. Go segment by segment. And this particular company had, I mean, they had thousands of employees. And so analyzing data, bringing things to fruition was easy. But if you're not having that bandwidth, then I would suggest please start small. So that's what you can do to start building your relationship quality with people. Build the trust. I mean, try and measure these 5 things. Try and understand why they buy, why they don't buy. Understand how we can improve it from a people and process perspective. Focus on one segment, make that change, and then move to the next one. Thanks for listening. And I think I'm on time. That's brilliant. So the next event is happening on the 26th. And we're going to be talking about accountability because it is easy to, well, we spoke about employees, we spoke about engagement, we spoke about customer relationship quality, we spoke about purpose. Now, all this is good. If people don't take accountability for what you're supposed to deliver, all this falls flat. So I'll talk about what we did with another client and what they did to improve their people's accountability, where they went through cultural change without losing people, without missing targets. And they did it within 15 months across Europe. That's a superb story. So looking forward to seeing you there. And for people who attended this time, what we do is basically we actually have a free audit. If you want to try that audit, please let us know. We'll send you. It's a no obligation audit. It's just to evaluate your business. We can send you the link, can complete it, and it will generate a report. And if you have got questions, then please reach out to us. Otherwise, thanks for listening.